It's funny because yesterday I was having a conversation with someone on the Metro about GM, and we were talking about AIG, and they said, yeah, we never should have given them the money in the first place, but now that we've given them the money, we ought to make sure that these executives don't get these bonuses and that they can't outsource jobs. If you're getting American money, then you shouldn't be able to outsource jobs.
Well, of course, that's the logic of it. He who takes the king's shilling sings the king's song, is the way it used to be put, and This is exactly what we're finding. But we also find other deviations from the rule of law, and the AIG case is a very good one here, because those bonuses that caused such an uproar were explicitly recognized in the legislation. And the senator from Connecticut who made sure that was in there, he's called the senator from the insurance industry, knew what that was for. It was to protect those bonuses. They were actually contractual obligations of the firm. Had they gone into Chapter 11 bankruptcy initially because of the foolish decisions of the top management, then those bonuses would have been at risk because they would have been part of the bankruptcy negotiation. Instead, they said, here's a ton of money, and part of that deal is an explicit legislative recognition of those bonuses. Once they became public, then there was this populist uproar. Oh my gosh, we can't have that.
Right.
Well, excuse me, you shouldn't have signed the legislation that had it in there.
Right.
And then, once they were exposed as getting all of these bonuses, which were, by the way, contractual obligations to the employees of the company. They were effectively sales bonuses. You sold so many millions of dollars worth of insurance policies, you got a bonus. Whether it was a good or a bad management decision is not my concern, but they were contractual obligations. They wrote that into the legislation and then started beating the drums of populism after the fact. I think really the word that describes this best is corruption.
Yeah. Democrats in the House have been calling for a VAT tax as a temporary means of patching up our deficits. What would a VAT tax mean for the American people?
Let's first address the temporary question. Germans still pay not only a solidarity additional tax for the reunification with East Germany. That's long over, but the tax is still there. But also Germans pay a special tax for the financing of the German Empire's imperial fleet. That was another temporary tax to finance Otto von Bismarck's dreams of German imperial expansion and colonies in Africa and so on. And Germans still pay that temporary tax. We should remember those things. This tax will not be temporary. Just make sure we understand that. It will be a permanent tax. And they know that. I hesitate to say people deliberately deceive us. We should normally expect people are honest and truthful. They know this will not be temporary. So we'll get an additional tax. If we had a choice, our current income tax system or a value-added tax, and we could really make that choice and make it stick, I think our income tax system is worse. It's much more intrusive into your personal life. It requires you to justify your behavior to the state and so on. But that's not the choice we're being given. We're going to keep our personal income tax and have a value-added tax. I think that's a disaster. So I'm strongly opposed to that. I think it would be a big, big mistake. And the experience worldwide with VAT taxes has been typically they're introduced at a relatively low level, 2 or 3% and so on. And you can watch them as they go up. And because of supply side effects, they do level out typically, between let's say 14, 15, up to about 17%. You don't see VAT taxes of 60% or anything like that because the feedback mechanism, it really reduces revenues to the Treasury. So there's a supply side mechanism there. But they start relatively low, whoosh, and pretty quickly they're up there. And people are insulated from it. Unlike even just a normal sales tax, at least you know something costs $1 really costs $1.06.
Right.
Right, because of that 6 cents tax. And you know that 6 cents extra I paid for whatever I'm getting from the state. But the value-added tax, it just says it's $1.25. That's all it is. And I'm not really sure how much tax is involved in it. There's no additional tax bill on top of it.
So personally, I'm not certain how a VAT tax is implemented, so maybe you can explain to me so that people can understand. How is a VAT tax implemented, and at what end of the transaction is the user paying? So you're saying it's padded into the price before the person makes the purchase?
Right. I mean, if you go to Germany or France or countries with a value-added tax, it just says the price. There's not an additional sales tax. Now, in some cases, businesses will put on the sales receipt how much percentage of that was VAT, value-added tax, or in German MST, Mehrwertsteuer, means the same thing. So you might get that, but it's not so visible to you. The idea is that a tax is charged at every stage that value is added. So all the way from the beginning of production all the way up, there's a tax at every level of value added. Now, ultimately, the economics of the incidence of taxation is a little complicated, but by and large, you can say most of this falls on the consumer.
Right.
Although it's a more complicated subject than that.
Certainly.
But certainly, you are paying tax when you buy the goods, but it's a perfect form of what economists call fiscal illusion. You don't know how much you're really paying.
Right.
What is the burden of government? We have a whole range of tax institutions designed to shield us from the knowledge of how much we're paying for the state. Withholding tax is a good example of that. Instead of getting a tax bill at the end of the year or in March that says, send us $17,000 or send us $4,000, you say, wow, that's a lot of money. It's been rigged so it's automatically taken out of your paycheck. At the end of the year, you get a refund.
Yeah.
So tax day is some kind of a happy day for many people. When I talk to people, say they're so happy they got a refund. I said, well, are you happy you made an interest-free loan to the government for the whole year? You could have been doing something else with that.
Right.
But it's presented as something you should be happy about. And of course, one of the other forms of fiscal illusion is the Social Security tax. There's the so-called employees portion and the so-called employers portion. So that you're told, oh, all you paid was the employees portion. But any economist will explain, and even in the Clinton administration they understood this in their Council of Economic Advisory reports, 100% of the Social Security tax is paid by the laborer.
Right.
Because it's money the employer would have given to him otherwise. It's a part of the total cost of hiring you.
Right.
And the employer is relatively indifferent how much goes to you and how much goes to the government. They say, I'm willing to pay so much an hour to employ you. Some of that ends up going to the government, and it's called employer share. Some of it's called employee share. It's all the employee's share. But that allows the state to tell us that our Social Security tax is only half of what it really is. And you get these phony documents from the Social Security Administration saying, look at what you'll be getting back based on your contribution. But what is listed as your contribution is only half of what you really paid. So in effect, they're artificially doubling the so-called rate of return on your investment in Social Security. So the VAT, long and the short, will be permanent. It will not be temporary no matter what we are told. Forget it. And it will lead to higher taxes. This has been the history of VATs every place in the world. And those taxes will be relatively invisible and difficult for people to detect how much they're really paying for government.
It's very enlightening. Listening to all of this, it's sometimes really hard to look at some of these policies and say that these things aren't being done deliberately. But you know, we have to evaluate everything on an individual basis, of course, and decide where we pick our battles. Tom, thank you very much for coming in today.
Oh, it was a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for watching LPTV. This is Austin Petersen, and we'll see you next time.